this is going to be so relevant and so inspiring. And so this is exactly what we're trying to do today, is to really just expose you to what they're doing and take away any inspiration that you can. I think with that, I will stop talking and pretty much turn it over to David and Ed from here. And I will stop sharing my screen such that they can share the materials that they want to.
Thank you, John. And hang on a second.
Okay, yeah, good.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Hopefully you can see my slide. John, does that, let's see here.
Yes, we can see your screen fine.
Great, fantastic. I'm going to put it into presentation mode, and it's an honor to be with all of you today. And it seems obviously during this time with COVID, there's so many other things that you're probably thinking about as it relates to opening your schools and caring for your children and caring for your teachers and your staff and your community. You know, I hope, you know, as Dr. Miyashiro just mentioned to me, you know, the work must go on. And so I hope this is a piece of the work must go on, but in no way do we think it's more important than the other bigger challenges that you have going on. But at the end of the day, certainly preparing students for their future possible selves in the world of work is one that we still must keep front and center to make sure that all of our children are gainfully employed and ready for the world of work. And if this is an example of the world of work changing dramatically, I don't know what is, but this is the world that we're going to be launching them out into. So with that being said, I'll dive into our work, share a little bit about the work that we're doing, and really do hope that you will ask questions, because it's way more interesting when you ask your thoughtful and amazing questions about our work. So we've got an agenda. We're going to talk about kind of the work in our schools. We'll talk a little bit about how we're doing this work remotely. Our journey, I think, John, you took some of those elements, the Zoom, the questions. You've already talked about most of these. So let's just jump into it. Let's go. Let's get at it. And I don't know if you talk about your students as opportunity youth, but through our Workforce Investment Board, perhaps you know your Workforce Investment Board in Colorado. There's about 550 of those across the nation. And ours here in San Diego, I've been on that board for 10 years. I spent 20 years hiring talent. It's the reason that Dr. Miyashiro brought me into the district, was to help with this idea of helping to prepare kids for a path to gainful employment. And some of the data that we were revealing through our Workforce Investment Board was that we had 31,000 students ages 16 to 24 years old that are not in school and not working. We call them opportunity youth. And Dr. Miyashiro would often say, you know, that's the system's fault. That's the school system's fault. We didn't prepare those kids to matriculate out into gainful employment. And the reality is, when we look at that data a little bit more deeply, of course, it affects some of our underserved populations in a very specific way. But this huge percentage, almost 20%, they've got less than a high school diploma. So there's lots of reasons why they're struggling, but without having this leg up out into the world of work, it continues to be a big issue for them and a big issue for us. So we can't have it. So in our district, the reason this work is happening is really our superintendent and the board's efforts to make a shift. And the shift was this vision to developing and preparing happy kids and healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. And I would say that work is more front and center now than it ever has been. It's just looking a little bit differently, and thankfully we have a superintendent and board that are looking at how we shift our business model in order to serve students, families, and community during this difficult time. And I'm sure you're having many of those thoughts as well. If any of you have questions for the superintendent, obviously he's here, and so please put it in the chat box, and please encourage him to respond. We often share the data of the work, and it's bigger than just test scores. It's way bigger than test scores. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gallup student poll, but data is really important to us, and I think the Gallup work is really important around this happiness piece, happy kids and healthy relationships in particular. And this is something that we care a lot about, not just for our students, but also for our staff. But when staff can apply this data, this metrics, these questions to the students, they almost start owning it for themselves as well. This is one of our schools, Meridian Elementary. It's a Title I school. The Gallup Student Poll surveys students 5th grade to 12 across the nation. I think about 1 million kids are surveyed every year. And what's really neat about the data, hopefully some of you enjoy data, you like data, appreciate data, but you can see what you can do in a shift to a Title I school. I mean, these are Title I kids. Many of our kids are refugees, probably a third of the kids in that school, maybe a half are refugee students. But you look at some of these core engagement questions, like I feel safe at school, I have fun at school, and you look at some of these other metrics, like at the bottom, I have at least one teacher who makes me excited about the future. The reason I circled these numbers is because you can see the change from 18 to 19, but then you can look at the metrics overall, US overall. You see what's possible for kids when our educators really start to see this piece of happy kids in healthy relationships, knowing those relationships start with the adults and the school community. So I want to share those numbers in the Gallup Student Poll. It's part of our work. It's part of the world of work, and it's part of kind of setting the conditions for this work to be possible in our schools. I'm so thankful to the superintendent and the board for all the hard work that's happened to get to this place. So for us, when we talk about the world of work, it's this merging of both education and the world of work. Dr. Miyashiro met with our city managers, leaders, Navy, Defense, and said, if you were running the schools, what would you do differently? And one of the first things that came back was, you've stigmatized labor. You've stigmatized some of the most important jobs in our community. And so a big component of our work is this element of dignity in all work and ensuring that children understand the beautiful kaleidoscopes of opportunities out in the world of work for them. But in order to do that, we have to bring education and the world of work together. It has to be merged, and it can't live separately. And so that's a big piece of the work that we're doing. The world of work fits into what we call a modern curriculum. And so we believe that our students, much like we talk about 21st century skills, essential skills, power skills, that students should be equipped and prepared with some of these core skills, and computer science, presentation literacy, which is so powerful. We run it, not this year, unfortunately, but we host a TEDx conference every year.
We're going to do it virtually this year.
Beautiful. That's what I was hoping he was going to say. So we're going to have a virtual TED conference. That's the way it should be. Social emotional learning. And this fourth element was the world of work was missing. And so that's the work that we'll talk about today and what we've crafted and created for our teachers to be able to deploy this work here in the school district. I guess if I leave you with nothing else today, there's a couple things, maybe two core elements. One will be about the RIASEC. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the second is that career development is a human process. And I think for too long, probably for 2 decades or maybe longer, we've outsourced this aspect of career development to software. And we have students in high school sit down at a computer and take their assessment, and then we try to map that to a major or college major. And really this process of career development is something that happens across the lifespan. And it's a human process. It's about conversations and relationships. It's about talking to a student to understand their future possible selves, their hoped for possible selves, as much as it is talking about their feared for possible selves. And we have research that directly correlates those two. What don't you want to become, and what do you want to become? And that aspect really surprised the researchers at University of San Diego. But possible selves has a deep history of research. And I'd be happy to share some more of that research with you. But there's no replacing the human in this process, this process of understanding who am I and who do I want to become. So as we set off to integrate this idea of every child on a path to gainful employment, we had to start with a framework for career development. And this was designed with Dr. Ian Martin at the University of San Diego. And this belief that every child should have a mission of me. Every child should know these core elements of who they are, this concept of self-awareness. What are my strengths, interests, and workplace values? And we'll share a little bit of research around interests, but you can drive back to the importance of strengths with Gallup. And we're doing that strengths-based work here with our adults, as well as students, and then this concept of workplace values. which maybe we could talk about another time, but that every child should also have the opportunity to explore both academic and career opportunities, the journey, and this is where I see this amazing correlation between the TED work and our students and the world of work, but that every child should be able to tell their story. And how powerful that is when a student steps into an interview to have a conversation with a recruiter where they can really tell their story about their strengths, interests, and values and how they align to that corporation, to the mission of the corporation. It's different than just trying to, here's what I can do for you today, but it's like, what can you do for me tomorrow? And how can you be a long-term employee in my company? And that's something that employers care a lot about, because turnover is really expensive and hiring is really expensive. So the better decision you make around talent early on, the more that's going to benefit your company. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'd love to see a chat. Like, you could even ask, what's my favorite color? Don't be afraid to use the chat. Okay.
Douglas from Elizabeth. And just quick, just general quick time frame. How long have you been in this? Just highlights of the timeline for developing this. Been doing it for a decade, or is this a couple years, or?
I've been here for 7 years. We started with a transition to digital and a thoughtful one-to-one process for blended and personalized learning. We partnered with the TED organization in 2015 and built a TED Ed curriculum with them that's free and online at ed.ted.com. And the conversation with the world of work started about 5 years ago now. You probably have junior achievement out in Colorado.
Yes.
So there's a one-day experience our kids got to do in 5th grade, and then Ed created a one-day world of work experience when he was at Qualcomm in corporate industry that our middle schools got to go for one day. And we took those 2 one-day experiences and built the world of work. This is its 3rd year of implementation, and it's really about classroom engagement and integration into the curricular areas to make the learning relevant. Interestingly now, though, is because we're pushing all of our curriculum and content digitally online for all of our teachers so that they could spend time during the crisis in Zoom contact and personal connections with students. So we're pushing out the world of work digitally on a playlist. And I think Ed's going to share a little bit of that in a minute. But this could be an opportunity to come in and play with us in the sandbox, because it's all virtual. And that's pretty much what we're all doing now.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Dr. Miyashiro. We won't spend any more time on strengths, interests, and values. You'll get the slides, but there's a plethora of research around each of these. I'm going to focus on interests and specifically the RIASEC framework. Are you familiar with Holland, the RIASEC? Friends? Is that new? Okay. So when we ground in interests with a lot of our work, and I mean, we could have grounded in strengths, we could have grounded in values. Please do ask questions. Again, continue to ask questions. We have a second computer here, so Dr. Miyashiro can answer questions as well on the fly. So we're set up to answer questions. But the RIASEC, or the RIASEC, is the most researched of all vocational typologies. And it was, you probably heard this so many times now. I'm sorry that you have to hear this again. But Dr. Holland was a PhD, University of Iowa, I think, and finished his career at Johns Hopkins. But he was a military recruiter, and they were doing crazy amounts of hiring. He's like, there's got to be a better way to kind of sort all this talent, this personnel. And it was through that process and through that experience that he came up with the RIASEC framework, which today is used by many organizations. And I'll share a little bit more about that. I think some of you probably had the chance to take the Super Strong assessment. I think John sent out the links for that. And so you do have valid and reliable assessments like the Super Strong by the Myers-Briggs Company that it's important because it's a valid, reliable, and empirically based assessment. When you go and search the RIASEC, you do a Google search, you'll find lots of RIASEC tests. And there's probably a handful of them that are actually valid and reliable. So I think you have to make that decision of what you feel comfortable putting in front of your kids. And I think as it relates to interest, because of a slide that I'm going to share a couple from now, and because we ground in interest, it's important that our assessment was valid, reliable, and empirically based. But we use some other strategies as well to help students identify interests. And I think a lot of this will make sense as we go further.
They asked, what's your RIASEC code at?
Well, maybe I'll leave that towards the end, and you can, when you learn a little bit more about the journey, and then I'll ask you that question. Which do you think mine are?
Perfect.
Which is always a fun thing to do with the students and the teachers. So, but that's what I would ask you. What RIASEC letters did your super strong reveal? And then there's this other question that we often ask, because starting in kinder and from kinder to 5th grade, we're not giving kids tests. We're having them self-report their interest themes. And we've created the protocols, processes in order to do that. So I'm excited to share some more of this with you. But for those of you who are new to the RIASEC, essentially they're a theme letter that aligns to a type of interest. And so you have realistic, the hands-on doers, investigative, the thinkers. They like to use math and science to solve problems. Artistic are creative lead with creative self-expression. Attorneys, it's interesting that many attorneys score very high in the artistic theme. When you think of the cases that attorneys put together, there are probably no two cases that are the same. So that creative self-expression really comes through in the research and the meta research. For the realistic, for example, carpenters and some of the meta research, like 85% of carpenters lead with the realistic theme. So there's some careers that are incredibly homogenous, but there are other careers that are incredibly heterogeneous, where you're going to find people across the RIASEC, all different types of RIASEC flavors, found like a project manager, for example, right? They probably come from lots of different backgrounds I know at Qualcomm, project managers, lots of different flavors, lots of different themes, but an HVAC tech, maybe the folks in marketing and PR, they're leading with artistic, and HVAC tech, or the plumbers, the electricians, typically leading with realistic. But then you also find people who are in careers that have the wrong themes, which is what happens. We have this conveyor belt of education, and I met a lot of engineers who weren't happy with their jobs, especially engineers from other parts of the world. I hired about 10,000 engineers from India with my team. And, they're on a conveyor belt of education. The parents say, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, and engineer, suck it up and do it. And we hired a lot of people out of Berkeley, Stanford, and MIT who had started their masters there from other parts of the world. And they're just on a conveyor belt of education. They start asking themselves, why am I doing this? And, when I think about our country and our talent pipeline, India has 1.1 billion people. And if 10% are highly educated, that's as many as our total US workforce. So how will we compete internationally with India and China? We have about 125 million workers. The best way to prepare our country to compete globally is to have all of our talent, all of our humans aligned based on their strengths, interests, and values. And that's a belief that comes from the Gallup research and lots of other research related to these elements. And the RIASEC is a core and fundamental piece of this work. So for those of you who want the research, here's some research from Dr. Rounds and others. But that interest fit has this high correlation with career success, performance, and income, more so than any of the other personality measures. Interests are also more stable over time than any of the other personality measures, maybe like values and strengths. We know values change constantly. All your values changed with this hit of COVID. Your values are shifting. But the thing is, interests stay consistent across the lifespan. And in fact, we're working with Dr. Rounds right now and some of his researchers on an assessment. So there's some interesting work that we're doing together. Please do feed any questions in around.
Actually, John Strott's going to moderate the questions.
Okay.
I jumped in.
Okay, cool.
Prematurely.
Yeah,
Cool.
And we'll, as we said at the beginning, we'll batch them. I do think there's one question now that would be great to hit on, because I think it's kind of embedded in this, is what led you to adopt the RIASEC specifically to kind of be the foundation of how you tackle this in AA?
I think some more of that will pop up as I unpack a couple more slides. So let me go. I'm going to get that in a second. Is there another question?
Let's keep going with the slides, and again, to everyone on the call, keep the questions coming, and we'll tackle them all kind of as we get through the first section.
I'm going to get those in like a couple more slides here. I'm going to help you see the answer to that. We're going to put all the pieces together. So you saw our career development framework, self-awareness, journey, and my story, and the way that gets integrated, exposed, the way that students experience it. and this is the design with Dr. Ian Martin and some of our other colleagues, our partners, is this importance for students to explore the career. When I was at Qualcomm with the Think A Bit Lab, we saw 15,000 students over 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, amazing makerspace, top floor. 90% of the kids that came to that lab had no idea that Qualcomm existed. The world's largest fabless semiconductor company was right in their own backyards. I'm importing labor from India to bring to America because we don't have enough workers right in our own country. I got 6th, 7th, and 8th graders from our own backyard coming up 20 minutes from their home, and they thought they were going to Qualcomm Stadium. So how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? This is that exploration piece. Whether you know the career or you don't know the career, even if you think you know the career, you've got kids at 7 years of age that are saying that's a boy job, not a girl job. So there's this whole aspect of gender stereotyping that is well researched, that starts to come out from these early grades. And so this exploration piece is key to knock those things down, to tamp those things down. Secondly, this importance of simulation and allowing students, inviting students to step in and to try it on for size. And so we've created all of these simulations so teachers can unpack these in the classrooms where students can answer the question, did you like it or did you not like it? How did you feel as you were going through that process? And then after that, if they can meet a professional, we've achieved more than 70,000 student views of live industry chats in just over 2 years through our process. We bring professionals into the classroom virtually to do a MeetAPro, and then level 4 is a demonstration of learning. I could run a whole school through the lens of this implementation framework. I could get every subject matter deployed through each of these explorations. I can find math and history and science. It could all be exposed. And here's your why. This is the why, the how, the what. This is why we're in this class. This is why you're learning this material. You said you have this interest theme. This is how I'm going to connect you to professionals. Weren't you excited about what they had to say? That's why you need to stay and participate in this class. There's so much power to this experience. And now that I've seen it in hundreds and hundreds of classrooms, I'm like watching it unfold. It's super powerful. And so we do partner with the Myers-Briggs company. We partner with Nepris, and we've totally gone beyond Nepris capabilities. I'm thinking beyond Nepris already, especially with COVID, but I can answer questions about both those companies and their tools. So I haven't forgotten about why the RIASEC, so I'm building to that. In order to get started, because we had lots of teachers who were like, I don't know any careers. What careers am I going to choose? We built a careers grid of 54 careers, and we sourced these from the gold standard in career assessments called the Strong Interest Inventory. And don't get wrapped up in the careers. It's not about the job. It's about the student stepping into the job, having the simulation, meeting a pro or someone like them, ideally someone who looks like that kid. And I have some crazy stories about that. But it's about giving the child a chance to step in and say, do I like it? Do I not? What are the strengths, interests, and values of the workers in that job that make them like the job? Do you think that sounds like you, or does it not sound like you? And when you see civil engineer as a first grade career investigative, I've watched first graders ask questions to a civil engineer from General Electric, a wind turbine engineer from South Carolina calling in, doing a Zoom chat. And 8 weeks later, we quizzed those first graders about their experience, and they remembered the intimate details of the conversation with the wind turbine engineer. And I'm pretty sure they don't remember anything else that happened that day at school, but they remembered the conversation with the wind turbine engineer. These experiences are really burning in the brains of students. They're really starting to gain an understanding of kind of the world of work and how it fits. They also think it's fun, by the way. So this idea being this concept of exposure, to hear about it, tinker with it, meet someone who does it, and to practice. And now here are your slides on why we chose the RIASEC. I've already shared with you that's the most researched of all vocational typologies. Vocational psychology has given us this gift, this lexicon, this language to describe self, to make connection between self and career, self and vocation and avocation. We just don't use it. It sits with the counselors, and there's not enough counselors, and the teachers don't speak the language. So it just happens. How many times could it possibly happen? So in our situation, we're hacking the system because our teachers are the ones who are learning the language. They're integrating it, deploying it in the classroom. And so when I talk to students about majors, guess what? Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Arizona State University, they classify their majors by the RIASEC. And the ONET, the government's database of jobs by the Department of Labor, they classify 2,000 plus careers by the RIASEC. So if you go and do an ONET search in Google, do ONET and teacher, and it takes you to a quick search to that quick link, occupation search. And if you go about 2/3 of the way down, you're going to see the interest themes for that career. Better than that is really everything that you have in the top 2/3, because it talks about the skills, knowledge, values, experiences, daily experiences. So if I had a student, I'm working with them on a career, and they say, I want to be this, I would go to, because kids always ask this question, right? Why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to be here? I would go right to the ONET in front of the whole class. I would go to that career, and I would go down into a couple of those sections and say, hey, Terrence, you said you like this career. Look here, this computational thinking, use of the software, collaborating with your class teammates, all this stuff. That's what we're doing in this class. That's why you got to be here. I'm preparing you for this, Terrence. So this is your journey. I'm trying to help you get there, but not if you don't show up. So the RIASEC connected in all these grades. Then you start to select a major. There's research around the RIASEC connected to majors, by the way. I don't have it in this presentation, but then it's connected to careers. And then guess what? Here's even a community college that's using the RIASEC. This is Tallahassee Community College. They've shifted their entire guidance framework where they're taking the RIASEC off to the left there, and they're connecting it with their credentials, areas of credentials, their certificates, their 2 years associates. And here in California, community college is free. So, and our kids don't know this. And so I can map this out for them and say, look, you can go to school for free right after high school, align it to your RIASEC, and then transfer directly into one of the 4-year institutions. So this is a powerful example, community college. And then this is the first time ever this has been done, but our Workforce Investment Board, $35 million that comes from the federal government to serve dislocated workers and opportunity youth slide that I showed earlier. Well, they also study the priority sectors in San Diego County and the region, and there are 7 priority sectors. And for the first time ever, we're linking the RIASEC to the priority sector jobs. And so why do I use the RIASEC? Because I can sit down with a parent in kindergarten and I can work with them to help them understand. And we've had 3,500 parents go through our learning process. They're learning their own RIASEC, as are the teachers. I can say, here's what the journey could look like for your child. This is what's possible. Here's this whole pie of careers and jobs and majors. Guess what? Their RIASEC is probably going to change. That's okay. But if they're understanding the language of the RIASEC, if they're also valuing the RIASEC themes of their classmates, which we are starting to see, and how kids are getting along with each other better because they're starting to appreciate the different interests of each other as teachers create project teams and a student says, oh, we need more conventional on our team. We don't have anyone with conventional on our team. We need someone who's organizing facts, data, and figures. We need Jonathan. You need to come over because you have C. That's what students are doing, which is really cool, and we didn't expect that. That's why the RIASEC is so valuable. That's why we ground in it. Did I answer your question?
Ed, after these slides, do you have some that show some really visual examples of what this looks like in some of the different age groups? Yeah. I think after we get through those, there's been a few questions that have come in. And that might be a good time to kind of pause after those concrete examples, and then we'll tackle a bunch of these questions and any others that come up in the meantime.
So I just literally got off of a webinar with the Federal Student Office of Financial Aid. It was Bring Your Daughters and Sons to Work Day, but they can't do it physically. So they asked me to come in and do a virtual session about the RIASEC with the family. So if I feel a little bit like if I'm losing my voice a little bit, and it's so cool to be with you guys right after that call, by the way, because we went deep into RIASEC with families. It was awesome. but they ask the same, they're asking the same questions. So it starts with classroom transformations and school transformations. So this is our language academy. And here you can see in Spanish, these are window clings. It's the World of Work initiative, but not at Bostonia because it's Mundo de Trabajo. Yo soy español, mi familia es de Ecuador, entonces hablamos español mucho por aquí, but now the students know there are 4 levels of integration in Spanish and English. Explore, simulate, MeetAPro, and practice. And of course, the RIASEC window clings as well. But check out how classrooms have transformed. It's really cool because we have these foam boards, and these are everywhere in the school district. This is part of our, we designed kits and tools and everything. So physical and digital materials that are all linked back to the RIASEC around the careers and the careers grid. But these are up in almost every classroom in the school district. And then things start happening. Like the center photo that I'm sharing with you, where it says RIASEC in the blue background, that was probably 3 months into this whole journey. I go into that classroom and they're reading Charlotte's Web. And I go up and I start looking at some of the writing, and the students were making a connection between the RIASEC themes and the characters. And so off to the left, students are self-reporting their themes. They're writing statements about how their interest themes correlate with who they are and with characters. Off to the right, there's a typical strand. I forget what grade level it is. Maybe it's 4th, but Native American missions. And the teacher was looking at the jobs from those missions back in 1769 to 1823. And then is the job common today? But you can see they're linking the RIASEC themes to the job. So there's, at the bottom right are kindergartners speaking to a director of CTE from Illinois. They're talking about their RIASEC theme. So the classroom transformation with the tools, the digital materials and the physical materials has been a big part of the work. So this is physical. And then I can kind of share a little bit about the integration. So starting in kindergarten, teachers start using the language. And very early on, I had a teacher reach out to me. She's like, we need to change the word from enterprising. It's too difficult for students. We can't use enterprising. And in this case, teacher Alyssa, and I have a video of teacher Alyssa doing this. She's teaching them conventional. And then it was 2 days later where I was back at that school, and it was parent conferences, and it was the group work was happening, and the first graders were talking to the parents about enterprising. So I was sure that we were going to change the words because it was going to be too hard for students, but what do I know? The students could grab the language. They grabbed the lexicon. So not all students, but certainly very possible in the early grades.
Boys and girls.
Sorry, we're not going to watch the video, but I'll share it with you if you'd like. The use of anchor charts. So I went to Australia, and I gave some presentations there, and I zoomed in with the students in this first grade class. And when I came back, the students identified 2 of the images that I had shared with them in the Zoom chat, because I saw sharks while I was there and kangaroos. So this teacher worked with the students to identify, well, what do you think the RIASEC themes would be of the shark and of the kangaroo, and why? So it became, and they want to present it to me. So of course I had to go in, and they presented. The shark was enterprising. I remember that. And I think the kangaroo was social and realistic. So that's an example, these anchor charts, compare and contrast. This is the language academy, chef versus the carpenter. So teachers are kind of integrating the RIASEC language into things that they would normally do. They're normally using Venn diagrams, compare, contrast. They're using anchor charts. And then some teachers went further early on. This is a 4th grade, one of our WOW coaches. It's like, oh, well, and she had a background in special ed. And she's like, I know I can integrate this into my gen ed classroom. This makes a lot of sense. What am I already doing? Well, I'm already using mystery science. I'm already going to cover these topics around science, the birth of rocks, energy. Well, which careers from the careers grid can I align and integrate with those curriculum standards in order to make sure I'm covering the standards, but I'm also covering the world of work. And now she's one of our coaches. And she could take any curriculum standards, look at the careers grid, and insert the careers and where they would fit in. And so this is essentially was her scope and sequence over the course of the year. And yeah, her kids were changed after this experience. So anyhow, so that's an example. Here's another example of teachers using the lemonade wars with the characters in the reading. What's interesting and what you see the children doing, the students, I walked into this classroom and they were talking about the lemonade wars, and then the teacher shifted, what do you think are the RIASEC themes of the characters in the lemonade wars? And so they had this discussion about the characters. And then she said, based on what we've been talking about, which themes would you claim? Like based on what you're hearing about the characters in the book and the reading, which characters do you think are most like you? What are the themes of those characters that you think are the ones that you claim? I want you to come up to our RIASEC board and I want you to put a Post-it with your name next to the themes that you think you claim the most. And that allows for conversation, reflection, and dialogue, which obviously is so important in the classroom. And so from here, then you can look at things like classroom jobs. I say most teachers in elementary have students participating in classroom jobs. Well, now I saw teachers take it to a whole nother level. This wasn't something that I contemplated, but now students were applying to the classroom jobs. Teachers were kind of posting the classroom jobs in alignment with the RIASEC theme. And if a student didn't understand or didn't know or wasn't clear about which RIASEC theme they've claimed, then those students could have kind of a mini internship with the students who had stepped into those careers and learn more about how that theme aligns to the work, et cetera. So, and I'll give you one more example and then we'll stop there to answer your questions. I think this is hopefully answering the questions that you were starting to propose, John. The final one here is, this is a career fair that was aligned based on the RIASEC. So, so this is the multi-purpose room at Rancho Elementary, and the principal is like, I'm going to have a career fair. And so she put it out on Facebook, and she got all of these responses from local businesses and community. And the whole career fair was set up based on the RIASEC. So the businesses basically set up in alignment to each of the RIASEC theme areas. There were zones, and students got to go through and experience all the zones, but they got to spend extra time in the zones that were most aligned to their interests. So hopefully that's what you were looking for, John, based on the questions that you were leading to. Those are some examples of how the RIASEC specifically is used in the classrooms. There's lots of examples, and I'll show you some examples of our e-learning through COVID, but that's a little bit later, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, this was super helpful, and just seeing the pictures helps make it very concrete in terms of how does this framework get translated into the classroom. I think the thing that stands out to me about all of this is we have our kind of career connected learning continuum that we've discussed in the Homegrown Talent Initiative. And the kind of first column of that is self-identity and career awareness. And in everything that you have described, you have both created a language for students to be able to engage in that, which, being candid, I didn't have a language for my own self-identity and career awareness until I was probably in college. And then you've also created a framework for teachers and curriculum to ensure that this is actually getting baked into how you educate. I'll shift over to some of the questions that came through. Madison asked a question about, imagine some have concerns or reservations about labeling or putting kids on a path too early. How do you tackle that?
Let me take it. Or
Sure. Actually, yeah, that's a question that comes out a lot. And the thing is we want kids to have experiences in everything so that each year they get more crystal clear on things that they like and don't like. So it's not labeling, it's actually giving them exposure in every area so that their interest can develop over time. At Ohio State, we heard the vice president speak about interests, because Ohio State labels their college majors by the RIASEC. But he said, you got to be careful with interests, because a lot of our young scholars come into the university without enough life experience to know even what they're interested in. And so that's why we were intentional about the design of multiple careers and multiple income levels of careers to show the validity and dignity in all work and value. But then also in middle school and high school, as they start to take their personal finance and go through the FSAID and work we've developed with the U.S. Department of Ed, they start to think about their workplace values and cost versus return on investment. So if I'm going to invest money in cosmetology school or a four-year university, this is what it's going to cost me based on the college forecaster. And then this is what my income range might be in the median. So conversations in middle and high school about career goals, about values in terms of, well, what type of home do you want to live in? And it's really a complete conversation about planning for my future. But yeah, I can see why some of those concerns early on. There are a couple parents that said, I don't want my kid to do that career. I don't want them to even think about being that career. It's like, okay. Not going to argue with you about how to parent your kid.
Yeah.
But don't you go to get your haircut? Don't you value that person? I mean, it's really just showing who the community is. And a lot of the MeetAPros are our parents and families. And it really dignifies everybody in our community, no matter where they come from. But showing them that there's a path to improvement too.
Madison, did that answer the question?
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you.
I think the next question I'll hit is Rebecca asked about, and I think it's related to this. Do you have families who feel uncomfortable with school or district having that kind of data on their students, or related ways to have families make sense of these themes in culturally competent ways for their home culture?
I haven't received one. As a matter of fact, a lot of our folks, you might have talked about the benefit of reducing bullying and having more acceptance of students when you talk about it. No? When we talk about interest and strengths, all strengths and all interests have value. So all of a sudden, the kid that leads more with conventional and is not socially accepted in different circles, when you start to talk about kids' strengths and interests and say, these are so amazing, and look at the types of careers that are available, it brings really hope into the parent lens in thinking about their child's future.
Yeah. We've actually had parents say that to one of our assistant superintendents. I will say too that, I mean, we've had 3,500 parents at a minimum come through this process. And we have a wonderfully diverse district where we have high SES and low SES, and the same comments from parents at both ends of the scale, at least financially. Thank you for doing this for our kids. I wish I'd had this when I was their age.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, any follow-ups on that?
No, that's really helpful. I think we just have a few districts that have groups of families where I think it's calming down, but there's just real strong data privacy concerns, and they sometimes translate to a fear that these kind of data will lead to their students being overly pigeonholed. But I think you've talked to how you guys kind of avoid that.
I think parents are the worst at pigeonholing. They're the problem.
Yeah.
The parents are I had them at Qualcomm for our camps that we ran. The parent would be like, I already know what my daughter, I appreciate you doing this, and I'm glad that she can participate, but we already know what she's going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I think next I'll hit Georgia's question. She was commenting about the K-8 grid, and she was commenting on seeing some of the careers not necessarily offering a living wage or being careers that are in decline. Can you say more about why you would expose students to those careers when they may have to actually juggle a real tension between what they like and what is practical?
You want to take it? Let me take it. Well, I would say that's part of the conversation. Do we think these careers are going to be here in 10 or 20 years? Yes or no? And we're always adding to the grid as well. So we believe in new and original content. But I would be wondering which one of the careers here couldn't offer a living wage. I would see, and there's some interesting data around this too, by the way, because when you look at data around, for example, say a technical writer that gets into technical writing, who maybe has the skills and ability to be a technical writer, but isn't very good or is just average, they may not make the full potential of that wage or that career. Versus a baker, I don't know which one you're identifying that you wouldn't be making a living wage, but I can imagine some of these that perhaps wouldn't make a living wage. I know doctors that volunteer 100% of their time, and our only existence is based on donor funding in other parts of the world. So I think it's part of the conversation around back to strengths, interests, and values.
Yeah.
There's multiple aspects of the conversation around the job.
And the 54 are just the basement. We've developed careers that will come into play in the middle and are the high school grades. And also, if a student really is enjoying social, artistic, and enterprising careers, then it opens up more careers for them to explore, so they can continue learning about the different opportunities that align with their interests and strengths. Yeah.
George, any follow-up questions on that?
No, that was really helpful. I also think that some of the comments you made earlier about the work that you do with students in middle and high school, I think maybe even answered my question more. So I mean, I have a daughter who's 12 and she's interested in some careers that don't typically make a lot, and we're already engaging in those conversations. So I didn't mean to say that, you know, that was bad, but just trying to understand more how you were thinking about it.
Some of the early conversations, one was a fourth grader who said, I was going to be a football player when I grew up, but now I think I kind of like civil engineering because I'm this. It's really opening their minds to different things.
And especially in kinder, because we're just starting this conversation, we want them to be exposed to careers that they're familiar with or they might see out in the world. So anyways, we could talk about lots of that strategy and design.
And the comment about your daughter, when you survey kids, most of them before they start the program, they want to be a police officer or a vet. And when they do the veterinarian experience, kids that thought they wanted to be a veterinarian don't want to be a veterinarian anymore. Because when we meet a pro and they have to put animals to sleep and they have to cut them open, it's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to love animals. Well, there are other jobs.
I think we heard that exact same story from a young girl in Canyon City who did a veterinarian internship and very quickly learned that was not what she wanted to do.
Yeah, so don't decide when you're in medical school where it's too late. Decide now. When
Yes. I actually think this is a great segue into Alex's question around how is this K-8 program aligned to and continued in students' high school experiences?
We are actually in the process of creating our first K-14 school. We got a charter approval from our board and will open in 21-22 around interest themes and big picture learning's model of leaving to learn school to work. Our high school district that we feed, we're K-8, wanted to use this only in their CTE programs, which is why we're going to create our own high school, because they're not using it fully. It's a half measure. But a lot of our districts that are using it now are using it to make sure that when kids choose a CTE program or a career pathway, that they have deep understanding of their self-awareness, so it's aligned with that career trajectory. So if you have a CTE or pathways program, this tool in K-8 will really help kids make decisions with their families about what they want to do in their high school experience and their first 2 years of college.
And the power is like the diagnostic of the human, of the child, the parent, and the educators being able to have a conversation together, all being on the same page, talking the same language. Like that's the power, is the dialogue, the lexicon, the language. Yeah.
Any follow-up questions, Alex?
No, that was terrific. We just have a few of these communities that really are leaning into like a comprehensive system that are thinking about elementary, middle, and high school. And I love hearing how that transitions in. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I'll go to Amy's question next. And then I think after that, we will hit most of them and we can continue on with kind of the next section. Amy was saying, or mentioned that you talked about how the RIASEC results will change over time. Have you tracked changes in students or noticed trends?
We haven't tracked them in a sense yet, but that's one of the reasons that we're partnering with the Myers-Briggs company, because the assessment that you took, what's different about it is well, they call it a lifelong learning platform. What I like about it is that you take it with you forever. It's always your page. And so our goal is to, like, I really want to study that. I think there's really value. I think we can moderate for the period of adolescent disruption in middle school by helping to ground students' strengths, interests, and values in K-5. And a brief, just anecdotal piece on that. 2 nights ago, I got a text message from one of our WOW coaches. Her daughter, in her daughter's class, she knows another mom, and that mom is a therapist. And she mentioned to our coach, I was just working with one of your 5th grade students in therapy. Of course, didn't share the name, but said she was she's been having a hard time with being 5 weeks away from her friends, but she gushed about her RIASEC themes and the confidence that she had in understanding her RIASEC. And yeah, that was kind of a moment for us to just take a step back and think about the work. It is, I don't know, it's hers. The RIASEC is hers. It's not ours. It's not some tools. It's not some technologies. It's the gift that teachers have given that child to understand herself in new and powerful ways.
The parents have also taken the Super Strong. It's a community-wide tool when you partner with the Myers-Briggs company. So the parents take it and it's a rich discussion with our families, especially those that are looking to improve their own circumstances.
Yeah, so we can pivot our parents who are families, many of whom are refugees, say job is the #1 area of concern for me. Well, we can now help them with the lens of the RIASEC, introduce them to the workforce board. And we've had parents get jobs right here at job fairs, and the RIASEC is helping. We're now posting jobs here in our own district based on the RIASEC or with the RIASEC in alignment. So it's a great common language to start, and then you build in strengths and values, and now you have a whole picture of the human.
Amy, any follow-ups on that?
No, that's great. when I took it, I was thinking about how different my responses would have been when I was in high school. So just wondering if you had noticed any trends over time, but helpful.
I can send you the research slides from Dr. Rounds, but they show that, see, part of the problem with the research is that no one's doing this work in the early grades. So they start in the middle school years. So that's your starting point. And you know, the research does show that interests start to really be well baked in late adolescence, and then they peak and maintain consistency across to middle age, being 40s, where then you see some crossover where men take on a little bit more of a female-oriented social theme, and females take on a little bit more of a realistic theme, at least in the data. But there's generally a high consistency of interests. Anyways, I have so many ways to describe an answer to that question based on personal experience, but not from data in our district yet.
I think that covered most of our questions, if not all of them, to date. So if you want to kind of continue on,
okay.
I think the next section is more about how you do this remotely.
Yeah, and I'll share, again, we've talked about teachers, so I won't spend any time there. This is actually parents coming through. This is our family and community engagement office, our liaisons. This is Arabic and a Farsi translated session. We live translate RIASEC. I don't speak Arabic or Farsi, but we all speak the RIASEC, and it's pretty funny when you see that happen. RIASEC at home, oh my gosh, we go forever with that. Maybe I'm going to skip past this, but you can be doing RIASEC at home with your kids right now. Just like you have class jobs, you can have home jobs for students based on the RIASEC. I don't know why some of these kind of shifted positioning, but there's a high school model, but I want to go to the COVID model because I already showed you some of these, I think. So, do you want me to do MeetAPro or do you want me to do the remote learning, John?
I actually think if you could do both and perhaps start with the MeetAPro, because I imagine MeetAPro is more of the kind of transition where you were already doing it before, but it could also continue in a version given COVID.
So the MeetAPro scared a bunch of teachers because they at first they're like, I don't know anyone, or I don't know how am I going to recruit these folks, and so we scaled up with Nepris, and we've crossed 70,000 student views in just over 2 years. So I think we're the biggest user at this point. I don't have data to support this statement, but this is something that I've seen. It seems that since the level 3 MeetAPro and the Nepris experiences have become part of our process, that there's many more live chats that are happening in our classrooms as well. So it feels like teachers are getting brave, more confident, maybe is the right word, to be able to talk to pros in new ways and invite them to come into the classroom to meet with students and be a moderator, someone who models an experience with students with the pro. And I don't have the data, but and I've talked to principals about this, I think we're having more MeetAPros in person because of all this. And so that's been pretty powerful. But Nepris has been a good partner. I always update the numbers. I think the last time we crossed 70,000. But teachers are able to go into the system. They can source pros. They can source some of our previous sessions. And it's a great tool to connect with professionals, and ideally someone who looks like them. I'll give one anecdote. We had a group of middle school girls, Middle Eastern girls, and they said, we want to meet a Middle Eastern attorney, a female. And the teacher didn't know anybody, couldn't source the person, and Nepris helped source that person. And I got to go and watch as these young ladies basically interviewed this woman from Chicago who was an attorney. She came in, she had her hijab, and it was very powerful to see these young women connect with this attorney. So ever since then, I think it's been a very useful tool. Do you want to add to
Well,
that?
we're shifting towards our own parent census and utilizing the super strong that some of you took to, one, get some information about our parents, but also their careers, so that the curriculum really becomes our parents and their careers, and also the business partners in our local community. So rather than just a random police officer, our police chief gives us, hey, why don't you guys work with forensics and our detectives on this one? Because there's different types of careers in the organization that we're learning about that. Yeah. Oh yeah, dispatcher, there's probably someone there that's just answering phones and watching the screen. Yeah. It's very interesting. But when you have the community and your local businesses be the MeetAPros, it adds a different layer of engagement. And there's so much pre-work in the career development and then the classroom exercises that when the pros come, the kids have such good questions and they already know so much. So the pro has a really positive experience. They really, when's the next time is, you know.
Yeah, I think that is, I think, our future. That's our hack, is really leveraging our community. So,
and just to be clear on this includes individuals coming into classrooms. This includes live stream videos with people who are outside of the classroom where the students in the classroom are watching this. And then the third piece is you have a video bank of past of these, so it's no longer live, but you can still experience this. Is that like the right
those are all the levers. Yeah, those are all the levers. Yeah, the number of 70,000 is just actual student views of live industry chats. So not recorded and not a human in the classroom. That's all through Zoom. Cool. All right. And so, of course, we have these. I love this because this was the Language Academy that brought, these are families that came in to have this experience with students around El Carpintero, the carpenter career, which is on our grid. These are second graders participating. What was so cool about this is this young lady, the story that I received was, she claimed the realistic theme, and she knew that the carpenters were coming the next day. Well, it turns out that she went home the night before and she designed an entire blueprint of her dream home. And then she came in the next day for this experience wearing overalls, and she was ready to be a carpenter. And so she was living it, right? She was experiencing it. She was ready for that simulation. And had we not had this experience, I mean, she was glowing. She loved it. And that's what we're trying to make real for kids. And of course, I love Sammy getting to meet, you know, he wants to be a superintendent, but it's cool when, and this was do you want to share about Sammy?
Yeah, when he was in 4th grade, he said, hey, I have the same RIASEC codes because we wear our badges when we go on our school tours. And then I just had a conversation with him about my path to become a teacher and how I probably shouldn't have been a teacher because I lead with enterprising and I question everything. Like, why are we using this curriculum? Why are we doing that? Principal didn't really like me when I was a teacher. But then in the lens of superintendent, describing the work, and then he ended up doing a job shadow all day long with me on one of our school tours, and he's still set on being superintendent. He knows the pathway, credential, and then administration, and then diversifying experience.
It's cool.
But yeah, he's in 7th grade now.
7th grade, Sammy. So that's the power. That's the power of these connections. So, so a little bit about kind of our. Do you want to set the stage for the e-learning playlist and what we've been doing?
No, go for it.
Okay. So, and maybe this is probably exactly what you guys are dealing with right now. And how do we deploy a curriculum?
Actually, I'll take that. So
Okay.
prior to the shutdown, our teachers were using their Google Classrooms and pushing out playlists individually for students. And we allowed lots of flexibility and choice. When we talked to our parents and our teachers about, how should we respond during the school closures, teachers were worried about time. And some of the teachers like you're dealing with have their own circumstances where they're juggling 2 young children and an elderly parent at home and managing still teaching their own students online. So there's lots of different circumstances. So we designed around flexibility, human connection, and guidance. And so we said to teachers, we're going to take care of all the planning, curriculum, and playlists for you using our modern curriculum, including the world of work and some of the TED-Ed presentation literacy, and also content areas. And then your job will be focusing on helping kids stay engaged and connected, and then helping parents help their kids through this process. And so through that, where World of Work was really a teacher's own purview with their grade level team or department, now we're building it centrally and pushing it out to them based on high impact and high engagement. And so because we're pushing it out centrally and it's digital, it'd be very easy for us to share with those that are interested in maybe getting started during this time on a really non-committal basis to see what it's like. Makes sense?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. So, fortunately, and we've slimmed it down a little bit, right? Because we don't want to overwhelm folks, right? So the idea is, Wednesdays, 20 to 30 minutes. Yesterday was the first deployment because we're back from spring break. And Naomi, our teammate, said, "Hey, I'm getting all these questions from students trying to get into the instrument repair, the carpenter. Do you know what's up with that?" So there were kids already yesterday at 9 o'clock in the morning they were using our playlist. They were doing the work. And yesterday we saw several of our YouTube playlists had 600 views already just yesterday.
Is that with the playlist there?
I'm not sure. No, I think this one's this document live. I mean, we could click it, but I don't know where it's going to go. So
Okay.
we can try.
Roll the dice.
Yeah, it's the same document. So, for example,
Oh, I thought.
and these are what's on my slides already, Dave.
Yeah.
David. So let me pop out of that real quick, guys. Sorry about that. There's so many links, right? If you use Google, there's like links everywhere. Anyhow, so this is we have 8 weeks left to the end of the year. These are our playlists. These are TK2. You see what
I was hoping to see the language arts, the math, and the presentation. This is just the WOW
this
section.
is just the WOW. This is just the WOW section.
We have other content areas on our playlist too.
Yeah. So so students through this, depending on the grade level, they're getting some more exposure to the RIASEC. In fact, the WOW coaches have done voiceovers, as you can see there, with the little sound buttons. So they've gone in and voiced over, especially for the early grades, but also for, I think, 3 to 5, they're included. So I'm just giving you an example of what that 3 to 5, 8 weeks would look like, which I think is a really cool jumping off point as well. If teachers wanted to get started with the world of work, that these 30 minutes a week, WOW Wednesdays are a great way to get started with the language and with getting students up to speed. So first couple of weeks, it's RIASEC exploration, self-reporting, like we talked about a little bit, and then home activities. What types of things can I do with my family? And then in weeks 3 to 8, they're going to explore careers a little bit more in depth. And again, the idea is for students to self-guide as much as possible through this process. So this is an example of student choice. The realistic week, each week is going to be a different theme on the RIASEC. And so students can choose the forester or the landscape architect or the horticulturist, depending on their interests. Of course, we have it mapped out by grade levels, but they can choose either. And then those lessons typically follow this format that we have for our 54 careers simulations. So these essential question is so important, right? So for the forester, how does adding trees help a community? And then of course, learning intentions. I will know what a forester does. I will understand which trees are best to plant in a community. And for this exercise, the students are actually pitching which trees they think would be best to plant at the city's center. And they're going to pitch to, I think it's the city council. So that's part of the activity that we've created. So there's this persuasive argument that's part of the exposure and the experience. And that's it. I kept it brief there based on the slides.
That was perfect. It definitely highlights, and looking at that playlist alone, it's clear that you just have a ton of content. And this is a great example to actually show how students and families can continue that learning on their own at home. I do want to probably take the rest of the time that we have to kind of shift over to some of the questions that came through. And then also we'll add my own question at the end to just get a little bit more of your story of, like, you say you're 4 or 5 years into this, how you got started, for people who are looking at this and thinking like, this is fantastic, and are trying to think through how to adapt it to their own community, kind of what that journey might look like. I'll first go to the chat questions though. When you were talking about the MeetAPros, there was a question around, do they use virtualjobshadow.com to flesh out the career exposure?
I'm not familiar with it.
Nope.
I'm looking it up right now. I'm not familiar.
David's going to look that one up. I know there's lots of virtual tools for site visits, etc. So no, that's not one that we've integrated.
The next question, Frank asked, have you found a way to reach the retired community? Our district is full of retired professionals and we need an avenue to reach out to them.
That's what we're doing now, because we realized that some of the MeetAPros that we relied solely on Nepris to do were a lot less engaging because there was no connection to us in terms of community. But now that we're accessing our community, including our families, and trying to put them into our system of MeetAPros, that's a way to engage everybody. And I love the comment, and it's yet another different way to engage our elderly.
Definitely.
Telling about their past and their journey. That's so great. Yeah.
Frank, any add-ons to that? I see Frank there, but don't hear him. I will go to the next question. Douglas was asking, what resources, people and money, were needed to design, develop, and implement this world of work approach?
That's a big question. We invested probably at this point about $2.5 million into the develop and creation. What you're seeing here is a very small piece. We've developed a whole ecosystem of world of work digital playlists that include personal finance, social emotional content for relationships and how to get a job, and career well-being also. So you're seeing just a very small part that's designed from TK through 12. And it was a heavy lift from the board because, you know, it's a huge chunk of money. And then hiring Ed from private industry was another expense, but the return on investment,
hopefully an investment
has been tremendous. And so we've invested in a few people centrally. They call World of Work facilitators that lead the further development of this work and also lead the virtual training and bring schools on. But really, once our principals and some lead teachers at a school site get familiar and comfortable, it just takes off on its own. But in terms of sharing with the board, we said, we're going to be able to utilize a third party to sell our resources to other interested parties at a very low cost to recoup some of our initial investment. And so with Myers-Briggs as a B Corp and we as a government entity, we can't really make profit. We can only sell for cost, and it's really low cost and plus some training to get started.
I think my own follow-up on that before I go to Douglas to see if he has any. You referenced the kind of people and the dollar cost. how long did it take to actually, from the time you first started designing this to when you actually rolled it out?
Took about 18 months from the first conversation to the actual first prototype. And the original 54 was where we started. And now we're building out to different career industries, including the Department of Defense and future careers, the gig economy, jobs that if you live in a rural area that you can access remotely. So we're starting to build on that so that we can have more opportunities for kids.
Douglas, did you have any follow-up? Oh. Sorry, Douglas, I think you're on mute.
Can you show the screen? I'll show you what it looks to log into our system.
Which one?
Sorry. Got too much going on my screen because trying to get everybody, but also you guys in San Diego there. But no, I don't at this point. And really, I need to jump off. We have principal interviews that are just beginning right now, and I need to jump in on that. But wanted to say thank you, and it's been incredibly well presented. Great work you guys are doing, and hopefully we can kind of use it as a springboard for some work here in Colorado. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
I think the next question, and I think you started to kind of get at this, Ed, or Ed and David. Amy was asking, are we able to access these resources?
Yeah, what are you interested in? We'd be happy to talk afterwards and see what level of interest but yeah, we're happy to share. We told John we don't like to share with our local neighbors in San Diego or California because they don't get it, but Colorado's awesome.
Yeah, we like Colorado.
I'm happy to kind of take that, and I'll make sure that coming out of this conversation, all of the contact info is available, and any follow-up conversations that anybody have to ask any questions or about specific resources, I will happily act as the connector for that.
I can't.
I think you somewhat hit on this too. I think the last big question I had, and I think if there are any other questions that the group has, feel free to continue putting them in the chat, is really just to hear a lot of the communities are in different stages of this journey in their own community, and what they're putting together and what they want to actually implement looks very different. But I think to that point, we'd love a little bit of what was your journey, and like, where did you start with all of this? And kind of, what was that progression? Clearly there was the 18 months and the $2.5 million and the board conversation, but if you could just kind of paint that picture a little bit more. Say
that again, John. I didn't understand the question.
If you could just talk about how you got from the idea to where you are today. I think there's a lot of people here who are at the idea phase and are about to have to go on the journey.
So junior achievement and then the world of work at the Think of It Lab were really places where I was exposed to the first time to the idea of simulation and really career development as a school, having that responsibility. And then the conversations that we had with our community were really where we started. We had the police chief, the fire chief, city manager, the mayor, several city council members, our own board, several financial people, the Chamber of Commerce, people from the Department of Defense, and all of them, when we brought these ideas to them, who've all told us that we've stigmatized labor and stigmatized some of the most important jobs in our country and community, all of them told the story of their nonlinear path to success. Most of the people in the room were at the very top of their organizations, but had a non-conventional path to get there. You know, I started working right after high school. I opened a business, and then I did this, and then I wanted to do this, so I went back to college and I did this. And so what they said was, if you can show your curriculum, and we're embedded in all of it, and kids are starting to think about the future and appreciate the people that are serving them in the community, not only is it a community service, but you're going to prepare our future workforce. And then the recruitment side of things from employers was they couldn't wait. They said, yes, this is all in. So it really was a community conversation with our local business owners and leaders about the role a school district should play in a community. And that's what we're doing now. And that's actually what we're doing with COVID in terms of reaching out to our community and our families and how can we best respond. And what they're telling us is we need flexibility from the school system. We need to focus on care. We need childcare for all of us. So these are the things we're starting to put into place as we come out in August for next year. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Childcare for our parents. They're telling us that's what they need. And a focus on flexibility where kids don't have to come back to campus if they don't want to. We can continue managing them in this way. And then teachers also, a lot of teachers are going to not want to come back to full school in the fall. So under the current circumstances, teachers can work from home too. We see that as the future of our district, period, not just coming out of the pandemic, but from here moving forward.
For all of the HTI participants, I promise you, I did not tell Ed to start with that answer around the intense conversation with the community and the educonomy, as you might call it. I do want to go to Allie's question next. How have your partnerships with the business community been affected by COVID?
By COVID,
Mm-hmm.
Our whole community is hurting right now. I mean, I'm sure that's the case everywhere. But the number one thing we learned is that our people that have to work don't have a childcare option because what they had in place before are closed down. So we as a school district are opening free childcare for essential workers. We're training this week and we're opening next week. And I think that's going to help a lot of families get back to earning income.
There is an
Any follow-ups on that one? I'll take that as a no or unmute.
Well, I think I
think
a question. So
yeah, I think I actually wanted to end with George's question because I think it's fantastic for people or for communities or districts or schools just getting started in this work. What are the 3 things that you would recommend to them as pieces of advice to get it off the ground?
Well, Ed likes to use the analogy, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you apply to others. And so Ed's put together some trainings that he could do either virtual or in person, probably virtual now, be safer, to take your management team or your principals through their own strengths, interests, and values through some of these tools. And really, I think that's where we found the most success. Once we took our teachers through the process, then they asked for more. So how can we do this for our students? It wasn't us pushing them. So I think starting with your leadership team and principals in terms of helping them understand their own strengths, interests, and values through these instruments. And then they'll see the value of why it's so important for students to have these things. Yeah.
Any final questions from anyone on the call?
Actually, the business question, it says, how have your partnerships with the business community been affected? It's actually increased because everyone's at home. They want to do something.
Yeah.
So talk about Sharp.
Yeah, that was the anecdote I was going to share. It was funny because Sharp Hospital, which is the largest hospital here in our area, they reached out. We were supposed to have a healthcare town. They reserved special spaces for our kids to come through because they're so well prepared, because they know their strengths, interests, and values. So they do a whole day experience. Kids put on lab coats, everything. And all of a sudden we had to say, no, we can't do it. So they call up and say, you know what? Is there any way we can do this virtually? Because our doctors and nurses, this would actually be really good for them because they're so focused on COVID and all this other stuff. They're missing their typical community relations activities. And if we could set up a WOW week, this would be a really good employee morale booster during this time. So it was surprising the way they articulated that to me, because I would have thought they're overwhelmed. They don't have time for this. They're who? And yet it was the complete opposite. They want to do it.
Any last questions or comments from anyone? Feel free to just jump in. We can let the chat fall away.
Well, we can't take credit for this, but our students started to do a live broadcast to continue the broadcast they were doing at their campuses. And what they're highlighting is local restaurants that are delivering. And so the MeetAPros are a little bit different, but having free advertisement with your local businesses on what's available and having kids say, hey, you guys should check out Angelo's Barbecue. You know, they're serving from this time to this time. We didn't ask them to do that. They just started doing stuff like that. But yeah, businesses are hurting, and this forum can help.
This is Gretchen. I just want to say 2 quick things. First, just hi. So good to see you again, and great to hear from you all again today. Second thing is, you are the third organization I've talked to in the last week who has had an uptick in business participation during COVID. And I think part of it is they have time. The other thing I have heard from the others is it's also mode of engagement. So, for example, talked with one group that does a lot of portfolio defenses for seniors at the end of high school, and have struggled to get business people to come be on panels. And now that the panels are virtual, they're getting way more participation because it's easy, right? Person is like, oh, join a Zoom, just like I did for my previous thing I was doing last hour in my work. And they're getting more participants, and they're getting a more diverse range of participants because they've changed the mode of engagement. And so for them, they're starting to ask questions about how do we make that learning durable for us after this time, because we thought buying them lunch was the best way to get business there, and we were super wrong.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks for sharing. That's great to hear that.
The starting point that we had in all the conversations we've had to do to get to where we are also, we had to do by ourselves. We don't have California Succeeds. When we saw Colorado Succeeds does, it's like, you do that?
Yeah.
You've connected business and philanthropy and education, and you do all this work together? Like, how obvious is it that that's the right thing to do? So in California, we're not that forward thinking. So you guys have a great starting spot.
Well, I think that one of the biggest things we can do is to bring examples like yourself forward, to share and inspire. I think what you just said about what the kids are doing with these videos is huge, because it shows this, you have built this very authentic relationship. It is like more than just a token business involvement. It is like true relationships between these students and this business in the community. And now it is paying dividends in both directions. And that's like the ultimate form of that actual like education and economy connection that you could have hope for. Any last questions, or we'll give people 2 minutes back? All right. Ed and David, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Everyone on the call, thank you for your active participation and all the questions. Again, as a follow-up, I'll make sure that all the resources get shared out across the group. Everybody gets the contact information, and any follow-up conversations, we're happy to have them.
Thanks, John. Good to see you, everybody.
Everyone have a great day.